Hello, listeners. Been wondering how you can help the show? Probably not. But here are 5 things you can do. 1. Subscribe. Support the show by clicking the subscription link in the show notes. 2. Review on iTunes, on our website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com, or on whatever app you listen to. 3. Donate. When you go to our website, click the cute coffee cup icon. Or in the show notes, click the subscription link. 4. Share. Sharing really is caring. Tell your friends and even your enemies to check out the show. 5. Watch. Wait a minute, it's a podcast, not a movie. Actually, it's both. Check the show notes to find out where to watch the documentary. You can also rent it on Prime Video. That's it. Oh, one last thing. Enjoy this episode.
Finally saw the light. With one look in your eyes tonight. She was sitting with me when it should have been you. Instead of knocking back this 100 proof, I need to sober up and stop acting like a fool. Thought I was doing just fine till you walked in my life. Looking for love but only for one night. Wasting all this time on what she put me through. So pour me one more round, time to slow things down. Got me spinning all around this town. And I know for sure before this night is through, I'm gonna be wasted on you.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain. Reality is not real. Wake up. Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey. Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
All right, I am here with my sometimes co-host, good friend Cuyle Carvin, and a great guest, Butch Gibson, who is in the band 3 and 20. Now, some of our listeners may recall one of my earlier shows, probably the 5th episode, was with my banker. People tell me ghost stories. For example, I went out to the liquor store the other night, right before I was going to work out. I went to the liquor store, and the cashier saw my Afraid of Nothing sweatshirt, and she had a ghost story for me. And my banker, a while ago, and he said, I got to tell you this crazy ghost story that happened to me when I was a teenager at a summer rental. And Cuyle had met Butch a few years ago from an Airbnb rental. And one night, Butch shared a ghost story with Cuyle. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, because it's a pretty crazy story. We're going to talk about that story and the aftermath, if anything new has happened with Butch. So with that, Cuyle, why don't you give us a quick introduction to Butch?
Well, hello again to Bob. And hey, Butch, man, good to talk to you again. It's been a long time. I met Butch a few years back. It was either 2018 or 2019, and I had an Airbnb in Georgia, and it was like a Walking Dead themed Airbnb. And Butch and his wife, they came down. I believe it was like a birthday weekend. Big fans of Walking Dead. And the town where my Airbnb was actually where the show is filmed. So that's kind of how it all ties together. They came down to, experience Walking Dead. Most importantly, Butch and I, we hit it off pretty quickly. And after his wife went to bed for the night, me and Butch, I think we talked for about 4 or 5 hours that night. It was crazy, like into 2 or 3 in the morning or something like that. And Butch told me some cool experiences that he had, paranormal experiences. And ever since he told me a couple of years ago, like I've remembered certain details and always thought like I would love to hear those again. So Butch, I'm not sure how or what we kind of instigated the conversation. I don't remember how we both were like, hey, we have some ghost stuff to talk about, but you had some crazy experiences, and I don't remember like your first one. If you had stuff you experienced when you were a kid, or why don't you fill us in like when your experience started, or if it was just this one random night when you were older?
Yes, for sure. And again, thank you guys for having me. But basically, the first experience, and I can't recall exactly that night that we were talking. If I gave you all the way back to my childhood experience, the first thing that I remember, this is something that I remember being around probably 9, 10 years old. My grandfather on my father's side had passed away. He had had a massive heart attack in the middle of the night. It was very sudden. And I remember that night, earlier that evening, he actually had been to my Little League football game. I went home, and I remember laying in bed, and we had in our home, we had one of those old, you guys probably both remember them, those old lamps that you used to, you would have to physically touch the lamp for it to come on. Touch it, it would come on just barely. Touch it again, it would get a little brighter, and then you touch it like the fourth time, it would turn back off. Well, we had one of those in our living room. I remember this just like it was yesterday. I was laying in my bed. I shared a room with my sisters back at that point in time, and they were both sound asleep. I was having trouble going to sleep that night, and this was before we knew that my grandfather had passed away. I remember all of a sudden seeing that light come on down the end of the hallway, because we always slept with our door open. So I knew that was a light you had to touch. So I figured maybe my mom or dad had gotten up, walked into the living room. They had touched the lamp. It was on. Well, no one was in the living room. No one was in the kitchen. Their door was still closed. So I saw the light come on, and I kind of was like, okay, that's pretty weird. I saw it get a little brighter. And so I was starting to get a little concerned then. And I kind of, rolled over trying to turn away from it, had my blanket kind of pulling it up a little tighter over my head. And then I saw, bright as it could be, the light go to the third level and then turn off after that. And so I was thinking, okay, that was totally weird. Well, I felt, when you can feel that, you can just sense that there's a presence there near you. And I just had the overwhelming feeling that somebody was standing there watching me. And I kind of pulled the blanket down, and plain as day, my grandfather standing in a pair of overalls at the bottom of the bed, just looking at me, smiling. I mean, clear as day, like I thought he was there. And then next thing I know, I was like, I blinked my eyes and he was gone. And then the next morning we found out he had had a massive heart attack and died. So that was my very first experience that I can recall. And like I said, I was around 9 or 10 years old.
Did you talk to her about it? Did she experience anything?
I have told both my older sister and my younger sister, they were both sound asleep. They did not wake. They didn't experience anything that night. I've, of course, discussed it with both of them. Pretty much all the experiences that we're going to talk about, I've had conversations with my family about, and we'll get into it a little later. I do have some of the experiences that were shared by some friends of mine and some family members. But for the most part, like that particular instance, they were sound asleep. I was the only person awake in the house at the time. So I was the only one that saw that with my grandfather.
So I know if I was like that young, that would be pretty crazy when you wake up and you find out that he had actually passed on. So that if that happened when you were like 8 or 9, I think you said, did you continue to have experiences like growing up, or were there few and far between, or what were your experiences?
I would say, I've had several other experiences that will always stand out with me. But as far as with in particular with my grandfather, I never had anything else after that. I almost took that to be, being 9 or 10 years old, you don't think too deep into a situation like that. You just realize, okay, it freaked me out. I was a little scared. But as I've gotten older, looking back on it, to me personally, I look at that as a peaceful thing, a peaceful moment when I look back on it now, because it was literally the only explanation I have for it in my mind is it was my grandfather coming, it was his opportunity to tell me goodbye. So now looking back on it, rather than being a child and being scared of what happened there, it's more so comforting. Now, some of the other experiences that I've had that we'll get into in a moment, those are a little scarier. I mean, that's really the only way I can get into it. A little more frightening than that. I don't really have explanations for some of those things, but the one with my grandfather there, I definitely could say that was something that, looking back on it now, it's more comforting than it was frightening.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
What if the secrets of today were written in the stars? The Daily Horoscope is your key to unlocking the celestial messages meant just for you. Every single day, Aries to Pisces. Every sign has a story, and every day brings a new chapter. Whether it's love, challenges, or opportunities, let the stars guide you through. Dive into the Daily Horoscope and let the universe reveal your path. Subscribe now. Your cosmic journey begins today.
That's the first time I heard that story from you. When we met, you told me some of the scary ones. Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong here. For some reason, I was under the impression that you don't really come from a family that shares those kind of experiences. Although you did mention you had talked to them. When you're having these experiences throughout your life from when you're young, did you feel like isolated from other people? What was your experience of you having these experiences? And was anybody else aware of what was going on? Like, how did that work? What's your experience like that?
I guess for the most part, especially the ones that happened when I was younger, and knowing when I would mention it to someone that they didn't see something that I saw, or they didn't hear something that I saw, it's almost like you said, it's not so much isolation, like maybe I felt like I was, hey, there's something wrong with me, that why am I seeing all this stuff and they're not? More so, I guess, just being young, I just really didn't understand it. But these experiences, I mean, they were plain as anybody I would walk into a room and see. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but it just, when you see something like that and you have that experience, or you hear something, like you said, you go talk to somebody else. Oh man, did you just see that? No, they didn't. It freaked me out for a while. And I've had some other things that have happened, not necessarily paranormal type experiences, but I've had some weird things that have happened as I've gotten older, that my wife especially, she gets a kick out of it every time it happens, and our kids too. I just have a knack for just really weird things, like having conversations with someone and I'll say the next thing, like I'll say something and then that would be like the next thing that was going to come out of their mouth. Or we'll be watching television shows and I'll say something and literally the very next line of whatever's in the TV show or the announcer on the game will say word for word what I just said. And it just blows their mind all the time when stuff like that happens. But all that stuff, I guess, is kind of connected. As far as just being isolated, I did have some thoughts, like, hey, there's some weird things going on here. Why is it me? Maybe I have a, something in my spirit that, I don't know how else to say it other than I've questioned sometimes whether or not I have something in me that draws that attention. And maybe they just feel when I've had these experiences, yes, some of them have been very personal as far as family members. Like I want to tell you one about my father in a little while, who just passed away 2 years ago. I've had some things that have happened that no relation to me whatsoever. So I don't understand why I would be a part of that experience.
It sounds like you definitely have some sort of sensitivity. Bob has met more folks than I out there, but there's like so many people have different backgrounds in the, the paranormal realm. It sounds to me like you have some sensitivities or some good instincts at the very least. We're all born with abilities to, or this connection to this other world that we often refer to as the paranormal world. And it's like over time and through life and the responsibilities of life and adulthood, we kind of like ignore these abilities that we're naturally born with, but some people just kind of hang on to it and they have stronger abilities. And it seems like you just have a really strong one, because it sounds like you could, like, if you were to focus on your abilities, it seems like you might be some sort of empath or a medium or a psychic. You have something going on, that's for sure, it sounds like.
So I talked to a bunch of people, Butch, and they're like almost ghost magnets. It's like they almost vibrate at a higher level. You know, everybody's a vibration. I was going to say, but you're really interesting. I was going to ask you because you have had personal apparitions, like your grandfather and your father, you're going to talk about in a minute. You mentioned in an email to us, well, you're going to talk about your band and actually witnessed something with you, and probably your family has. So that's interesting. Is it mostly just your family and people that you know that you have these paranormal experiences with, like with your grandfather, your father? Or are there other like transient spirits that you don't know who they are or what they're about, but you have encounters with them too?
Yes, one in particular, and this is one I'll kind of bridge the gap, and it's another one, Kyle. I don't know if I actually had mentioned this one to you the night we discussed. There's one story in particular I know that we're going to talk about that you mentioned. It's a little more frightening, but there was one night when you mentioned an experience where I actually have other people who witnessed it with me. This one it's still unexplainable, but as you know, I'm a member of one of the lead singers of a band called 3 and 20. We travel all over the country. I'm guessing this has probably been about 5 years ago now. We were playing a show at a wine vineyard in the state of Virginia. And of course, anybody who's been down in the South, you know that there's a lot, especially the Virginia area, Tennessee, North Carolina, there's a lot of antebellum land around there where there's still plantation homes and things like that. Well, the place that the venue owner booked us to stay for the evening was at a bed and breakfast. It was actually at a plantation home, a Civil War plantation home. So here we are. We're 5 guys, a couple of roadies that were with us, staying in this 3-story plantation mansion up in Virginia. And once we get done with the show, we get back, we grab some dinner. The owners of the bed and breakfast, they're already in bed. We're splitting off to our different rooms, and we start hearing sounds like a piano playing. And we knew there was a piano downstairs we had seen earlier in the day when we had checked in before we had our show. Well, a couple of the guys, we go downstairs, we're following the sound. We go downstairs, we see the piano, physically see the keys on the piano are playing. It stops as we notice it, but we see it. One of the guys was across the way taking a shower in the bathroom. He comes out wrapped up in a towel. He's like, "Man, did you guys hear that?" We're like, "Yeah, who was playing the piano?" We're like, "We don't know. We thought you were. That's why we came down here." And he wasn't. And so we saw that. And then go back upstairs to our room. We were hearing all kinds of crazy noises, sounded like children running around playing. It was really hard to go to sleep. It was keeping us up all night. Lights were flashing on and off. It was so weird. So we go downstairs for breakfast the next morning. We're all down there together. We're all kind of afraid to even mention it, thinking we're crazy, because we'd had a little bit of wine to drink. We'd been singing at a wine vineyard all night. So we go downstairs. We've been talking about it. The husband and wife that own the place, they come out and they see a look on our face, and right out of her mouth, the first thing she says before we start eating breakfast, she says, "So I guess you met the children last night."
Oh.
And so we knew then. We were like, okay. So then we just started asking questions like, okay, who are these children? What's going on? And basically her theory was that they were children who probably had an illness during the Civil War times and passed away, and their spirits stayed there at the house. She always hears them running around. She hears laughing. That kind of comforted us. We were like, okay, we're not crazy. We actually did see this. And then the last thing, as we were loading up to leave town, the later on that afternoon, we had all of our stuff in the van, and there was a huge chandelier that hung over the second floor bedroom window there, and it was out on the porch. And we were getting ready to leave, and me and 3 of the other guys in the band, we were all looking, and all of a sudden, we see the chandelier start swinging back and forth. Mm-hmm. And we pointed it out to the lady, and she's like, "Yeah, sometimes," she said, "I guess they just jump up there and swing. They're telling you bye." So we were like, "Oh my gosh." But that was one that actually I've been with my bandmates, and I actually was telling them I was going to do the podcast with you guys. And they were like, "Man, you got to tell that story. You got to tell the story about the bed and breakfast." And I told them I would.
Yeah,
so.
Sure.
That's awesome.
So, but you had an experience with your father who passed away recently, you said, and this actually happened after we met.
Yeah, And this one is going to sound a little bit crazy. And my wife actually was one of the witnesses to this situation. But my father passed away in November 2 years ago from stomach cancer. It came on really suddenly. He was totally fine, got sick, was diagnosed in June, and was gone in November. He was very young. He was only 65 years old. So it's been really tough on all of us. And my father and I, anybody in my family, my friends, they all know we had a tough relationship. Just some things that, I experienced growing up around him. He was, really battled with alcoholism for a long time. And so anybody who's ever dealt with that, that being in a family with a father that is dealing with that disease, it's, you see a lot of bad things. So we had some distance in our relationship, and I tried to get back as close with him as I could right before he passed. And what was crazy is, it's going to sound really silly, but because of a lot of the experiences that I've had, I am just a big fan of paranormal television shows. I watch them all the time. Some of them are, real silly. Some of them are very interesting, and I'll watch them all. And I just, for fun, have an app that is on my phone. It's the Ghost Radar app. And a lot of people play around with those things and think that there's nothing to them much at all. They're just for entertainment purposes or whatnot. Well, there was one particular night, this has been probably 4 months ago. We're sitting at home. My dog, for about the last 2 months before this, had been just acting really weird. I have a little blue heeler, and who's actually named Dixon Grimes. He's actually named after two of my favorite characters off of Walking Dead. So. But we're sitting there in the living room, and he has just been acting crazy every night. Every night he starts pacing around the kitchen after we turn the lights off and we kind of settle down to watch TV and all. And he won't come settle down. He's kind of looking at things in the corners and just kind of stalking around, kind of growling at stuff that's not there. And so I had been, concerned about it. It's literally had been going on about 2 months. And so I started joking with my wife, and I said, well, maybe somebody's here trying to mess with him. So I start just talking. I turn the TV off and just turn my Ghost Radar on. And I start talking in the air, and I'm like, okay, who's here messing with Dixon? Who's giving Dixon a hard time? Because my dad loved Dixon to death. He loved to come over to the house and play with him. So I'm like, who's messing with Dixon? Who's bothering him? Who's messing with his food? And all of a sudden, I start asking questions. I'm like, why are you sticking around? Why are you hanging over here and causing all these issues and making my dog go crazy? And it said, Dad. And I was like, okay, right. Yeah, Dad. Okay. And then I said, okay, if you're really Dad, then tell me something about you. And it said construction, which my dad worked construction from the time he was 14 years old. And then I was like, okay, this is getting a little weird. So my wife's, her eyes are getting real big, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, she said, keep asking it questions. And I was like, okay, then I said, okay, Dad, if that's really you, yeah, you work construction. I said, what happened to you? Why are you in this condition? It said Faye, which is my mom. And so I kind of chuckled at that. And I was like, what do you mean, Mom? What did Mom do to put you in this condition? And it said ashes, and we had him cremated. And so when it said that, and it spelled my mom's name out I almost lost it. I was like, this is absolutely insane. And then my wife's over there. She don't know what to think. I'm sitting there. I'm like, this is insane, And I saved the little voice memos and showed them to my mom actually one day, and she was freaking out as well. But that was a really, really crazy experience.
Yeah. You definitely have like some sort of, you're like a beacon to this other side. Absolutely. So yeah. So the night that we met, you told me a story, and the details are a little bit fuzzy, but it's one of the more exciting stories that I've ever heard. And it was something about, I don't remember at what point in your life this happened, but I think you said you had a roommate and you were experiencing like a black cat, which would kind of go under doors or between rooms, like through the wall or something like that. And it ends up in culmination of some crazy event that took place, like in the room while you were trying to sleep or something.
Absolutely.
If you want to kind of fill out those details in that story.
Yes, sir. It was the first home that I had purchased myself that I was living in before I got married to my wife. And it was a little old Mill Hill house that was built back in the early 1920s. And I'm living in this little tiny 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. And the first night that I realized something strange was going on I had actually had one of our bandmates had came down from Tennessee, and he was playing the weekend with us. We had a show on a Friday and a Saturday, and he needed a place to crash. So I told him, no problem at all. You crash at my house. You can ride with me to the show. You're going to be fine. You can take the spare bedroom. So not thinking any big deal. Well, so I'm in there. I'm sleeping. I'm doing my thing. He's sleeping. We wake up the next morning. He's taking a shower. I'm watching some TV. He comes out of the shower and just nonchalant as you possibly could be in the middle of a conversation with me says, hey, do you have a cat? You have a black cat? And I was like, no, I don't have a cat. I've got a dog. And I said, but I don't have a black cat. I have a huge Australian shepherd. He was like, okay, I was just wondering because when I was in the room last night, I kept seeing a black cat running back and forth in the bottom of the foot of the bed. And when I got up to look at it to see, what was going on, it ran like under the door or through the door or something and was gone, and I never saw it again. And so I thought that was strange. And this is coming from a guy, the first time he's ever been in my house. We've never had any conversation whatsoever about anything like that, anything paranormal. Our whole relationship was just based off of him playing, a few fill-in shows for us. And that was it. So that right there was the first incident at that particular house that I started paying attention to. I guess you fast forward maybe a month or two after that, and he ends up calling me on the phone and we talk, and he said, oh, I meant to tell you, I didn't want to scare you too bad. But in addition to the cat that I saw that night, he said, I'm telling you the truth. I saw a woman in the corner of your room. He said, I saw a woman in a long flowing white gown. And he said, I saw her for about 10, 15 seconds. Looked real as everything. He said she was kind of like floating in the corner, gone. And he said, the only thing I could think is maybe she's possibly your guardian angel or whatever. So at this point, I had not seen any of this stuff.
Tonight's Afraid of Nothing episode is sponsored by Podcorn. Podcorn is a marketplace connecting fearless podcasters to amazing podcast sponsorship opportunities, such as host-read ads, interview segments, topical discussions, and more. I've had first-hand experience with Podcorn helping me find sponsors for my show, which is great because it helps offset production costs and lets me produce more shows for you. Win, win, win. And working with Podcorn is easy. So if you have a podcast and are searching for a sponsor, look no more. Check out Podcorn. With Podcorn, there's no middleman. Podcasters of all sizes can browse and choose opportunities right on the platform online, set their own rates, and collaborate with brands directly without any exclusivities. You never give up any rights to your podcast, and Podcorn is there to support you at every step and ensure you're protected and compensated for the work that you do for brands. The marketplace mission is to give podcasters transparency, creative freedom, and full control of how and when we monetize. With Podcorn, you never have to be afraid of finding a sponsor and getting paid. Click the link in my show notes to sign up to Podcorn and start browsing sponsorship opportunities after the show.
And I'm just thinking, okay, this dude has seen all this stuff in my house. What's going on? So we have that phone conversation. I guess it's maybe a night or two later. I'm laying in bed. I am having the hardest time trying to sleep that night. I don't know why in particular, but I guess what I'm going to say next might be the reason why. But all of a sudden, I can't recall the exact time. It's around maybe 3:30 in the morning. I start hearing the loudest noise. It's almost like rock music playing at the top of just the highest pitch, guitar, screeching guitar, horns. I mean, anything you could think of, just loud, screeching, just crazy noise. And it's so loud, I literally had to put my hands over my ears, and I could feel a presence as I'm laying in the bed. I could feel the presence of something behind me. And so I'm turned over. I'm hearing this noise. I am freaking out. I'm starting to say every prayer I can think of. I know there's something behind me. I'm seeing like flashing lights, hearing all this noise, and just loud as everything. So I'm shouting out prayers. I'm just like, Lord Jesus, please, whatever's going on, if you can just make this stop. I'm shouting out Bible verses, anything I can think of to make this stop. I don't know what it is, but I just don't want to turn over and look because just something in me is telling me that whatever it is, I do not want to see. And I'm just laying there. I'm hearing all the noise. And then I'm praying. I'm just like, in the name of Jesus, please just let this stop. And then all of a sudden, everything quits. The lights stop flashing. The music's gone. I feel on my shoulder as I'm laying there, I know there's a presence behind me, and I feel something, plain as day, reach over, grab my shoulder. And I didn't want to, but I did anyway. I rolled over, and when I turned over, I saw that same lady in the corner, the floating in the corner. That Fiddler was the guy's name who had stayed with us. He plays a fiddle. That was his nickname. Mark Fiddler is what we called him. But that's what he had seen. And I saw that just for a split second, just right there in the corner. It freaked me out. Then it was gone. And I never had any other experience in that house for the whole next 2 years that I lived in it after that.
So, Butch, this woman, this apparition, was it a full body apparition, or did you just see kind of the first top of her? I asked because on my documentary, Afraid of Nothing, there was a similar type of thing, but it wasn't like a full apparition. It was kind of almost like the first top part of the body. So I was wondering, was it a whole person that you saw or part of one?
I don't recall seeing any legs because, like I said, it looked like she was floating in the corner of the room, like she was suspended, almost like her head would have been touching the ceiling and just floating up there, and just white, just gleaming, peaceful looking, nothing scary about her at all.
Would you say the feeling was like love or what? Again, it's interesting because I've heard a different variation of this from someone else before, but what was the feeling you got from this person?
It was almost like instantly in my mind, I could tie back what Fiddler had told me his experience when he said, I saw this woman and I don't think there's anything to worry about. I think she might have been your guardian angel. And the way that I was saying that prayer, and the minute that I said amen, everything stopped. I felt that hand. I turned over expecting to be freaked out. And when I saw her, it was just peaceful. It was almost like I knew everything was okay. I knew that whatever was going on before, I didn't have any reason to worry about it anymore. And that's the only way I can really explain it. And then once she was gone, I never saw her again. I never had anything like that happen with the noise or anything. I never personally saw the black cat. So I wish that there, I could talk to someone that would have experience with that to like you were mentioning earlier. So maybe they could tie it all in together. If it was the black cat, the manifestation of whatever the spirit was that she was protecting me from. I mean, I don't know. I just know that after I saw her, after I said that prayer and those noises stopped, the whole rest of the 1.5 to 2 years I lived in that house before I sold it and got married, I never had another experience there.
Yeah, usually a black cat, and people think of a black cat like witchcraft and all that stuff, but a lot of times in dreams or like with shadow animals, it's kind of like a harbinger of something that's going to happen, kind of a warning or to let you know, an omen that something's going to happen.
Yep.
So it's weird that your friend Fiddler saw this and then called you and warned you, and then shortly after you had this event.
Yep. Yep. It's crazy. It was less than 2 months after he had been staying there when I got the phone call from him. And then it was like 2 days after the phone call when it happened.
And it's interesting the time that you said it happened. You said maybe it was like 3 to 3:30 in the morning, and that's like notoriously, some people refer to it as the witching hour or the devil's hour.
Yep.
It's like that time frame really corresponds with so much activity that people have in experiences. So, I mean, makes sense. I got the goosies listening to it again, just like I did the first time.
Yeah, it's nuts, reliving it in my mind and picturing it. Because when you have those visuals and like those sounds, retelling it to you, I can still hear. I just wish that I would have had the audio of that. I mean, it's sounds I've never heard in my life. I mean, but that's the only thing I can really explain it. The only thing I can compare it to would be just like a crazy, just cranked up as high as you can turn it up, heavy metal rock band, just playing off key, just crazy sounds and those lights and everything. It's in my mind, the only thing I could say is as I was laying there experiencing it, it was like there was a war being waged in that room. And I don't know if it was over me or I was just there in the midst of it, but it was like that was going on. And once I was begging for it to stop. And once I said amen to that prayer, it was over. And then I looked and I saw that lady and she vanished, and that was it. I've never had anything like that happen again. Nothing dark like that.
Were you going through anything in your life at that point? Was that a transition point in your life? Were you going through any conflict at that point?
No, looking back on it, I had just gotten into I had gone through a divorce from my first wife, but it had been a couple of years since that divorce. And I had actually just gotten into a really good relationship with my now wife, who I've been with for the last 5 years. So if anything, I was living in the first house that I had bought on my own and, had a good job. And there was really nothing negative going on that in my life at all that I would have thought would have brought about anything like that. You can always look on the flip side. A lot of times you see people get attacked by negativity when they're going through good things, good times.
What about your dog? Did your dog usually sleep in the bedroom, or was it in the living room? Did that dog notice anything? Or
now, what's crazy about that is by the time, and this is a sad story because I love my dogs, but by the time I actually had my experience, and I don't recall him seeing anything the weekend that Fiddler was there, but by the time that I had my experience, my dog had actually ran away, and I never found that dog again.
Wow.
I looked for him for probably a year, just putting up posters, checking out, and he was gone. And he was gone, and so he actually was not there. He had been gone probably, I guess, about a week after we had a snowstorm, about a week after Fiddler had been there. And I went to let him outside to use the bathroom, and he took off running towards the train tracks, and I chased after him. Never could catch up to him, and then went around checking all the animal shelters and never saw him again.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yep, and that was crazy.
The fact that you didn't see the black ear experience the black cat yourself, I'm curious if this black cat was ultimately like some sort of spiritual shapeshifter. That maybe that's the thing that ultimately went to battle or whatever might have happened with this guardian angel of yours. And it's like, and also just the possibilities of who this guardian angel could be in your life. Just why it happened is really, really interesting. I've never really heard of this kind of experience where there's just some sort of battle or whatever it was, like just somebody experiencing it outside of like, historical or like in biblical ways, so it's just so interesting.
Yep. Yeah. It's definitely something I'll never forget.
So yeah, Butch, so you had mentioned since we met and you had that story, you mentioned your story and your experience with your father. Has there been anything else that's happened, or is this gift that you seem to have, like this being this beacon to the other side or this vibration? Do you think your children might have it, or anybody in your immediate circles have anything going on?
My mom definitely has had experiences that I guess she never wanted to share with us when we were younger because maybe she was afraid it was going to frighten us. Before my dad had passed away, I guess it's been 20 years ago that her mother passed away. And she's told me on numerous occasions that she has seen full apparitions of her mother visiting her at my mom's home where she lives now. I mean, she's told me that I'd say more than a dozen times, to almost to where it was like a running joke. I would be over there staying late at night sometimes watching TV with her. I'd go over for dinner and I'd stay and we'd watch TV. And then I would look into the, towards the hallway going towards the bathroom. I would have a feeling like I saw something, and she would just kind of grin at me. She would say, "Oh, that's just Mama. She just goes from the bedroom to the bathroom back and forth. She kind of stays in that area of the house." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then she told me, "Oh, I see Mom in here all the time. She's always in here watching over me." She's had a couple of experiences since my dad's passed where she said that she's seen him moving about in the home as well. So that definitely ties it into being something that obviously could be a trait that we share together. And both of my sisters have had experiences. My older sister more in particular than my younger sister, but they both told me experiences that have happened to them after I've shared all mine. As far as my children, fortunately, possibly for them, they're my stepkids. So if it would be anything that's passed down, they may not have to worry about it unless they get it from their mom or from their dad. But they believe, when I tell them stories, when I tell them I hear something in the house we're in now, they've heard strange noises in the middle of the night that they can't explain, and little voices and things like that. And so you never know, maybe just being around somebody like me who, for whatever reason, is more receptive to it, it's maybe opening up that side of them. Because like you said, Kyle, we all have it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And your band, 3 and 20, I wonder if they're part of the connection of you having the abilities you have and also your musical talents. Everything is this energy and this vibrations. Music is all about vibrations. So it's like, I wonder if that kind of plays into it, having like the talents of both and how they might combine or, affect one another, this vibrations of music and the vibrations of the paranormal. Speaking of your music, what's life been like since, I'm assuming like with everything COVID, you kind of weren't able to travel and whatnot, but do you have shows coming up?
We're actually in a very good place at the moment here in South Carolina as things have started opening up a little more. Basically in February and March, we have played more shows in these 2 months than we did all of 2020. It has started expanding. It started getting a little busier for us. We're getting calendar pretty full. We've had to make some sacrifices. Of course, we're not getting quite the payout that we were the year before last because a lot of these venue owners, they're hurting really bad now. So if we're wanting to play and keep working, we've got to negotiate and kind of help them out. And so that's been a little tough on the financial side, but at least we're able to get out and play a little more now. And as things start opening back up and the vaccines getting around and people are getting healthy and we can get back to normal, then I think the money side will come back as well. But we're just fortunate to get any opportunity we get to play.
Well, that was excellent, Butch. Thank you so much for your time tonight. We wish you a lot of luck with your band and hope things open up for you soon. And we hope you have nothing but good spiritual encounters in the future. And Kyle, as always, my friend, thank you for being part of the program. Look forward to having more episodes with you in the future.
Absolutely. This was so much fun. Go out there and check out Butch's 3 and 20 band. They're really unique music, and I really dig it and hope you will too.
Psych! Oh, you impatient listeners who clicked off. There is still 15 minutes of bonus material coming right at you right now. Hello, Mike Markowicz. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, how are you, Bob?
All right. You were in the film Afraid of Nothing documentary. You were our EVP expert, but at the end, you also shared a pretty personal experience that involved a shadow figure and a woman in white. And I sent you a file. I just interviewed someone for an episode, a gentleman who is in a rock band, and he had a crazy experience. What did you think of that when you listened to that?
Yeah, it's pretty unique. It sounded like it was a strong experience to see something like that when you're not in the field, you're not asking for it, you're not pursuing it. That's pretty crazy, especially the sound aspect of it, what he was listening to.
It sounded like the shadow cat was kind of like a harbinger of something that his friend that visited that was in the band heard, and then his dog ran away, and then one night he's in bed like he said, and there's like this battle going on, and there's this music, the worst rock music, discordant but really loud and out of pitch, and he was like frozen until he felt that hand on his shoulder and he saw that woman in white. You had a different experience, but what did you think that might have been?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of strange. It's what he takes away from it, because hearing of the story, I can draw an opinion on it, but he experienced it. So whatever he was supposed to get out of it was probably what the experience was meant for. Those things just don't happen at random. There's a point to it. Whatever he got from it is probably the true reason behind it. So I found a kind of a correlation in it that the spirit that he saw was elevated, so he had to look up to it, and that was the same viewpoint that I had. I was looking up as well. So it seems to be that the vantage point that they assume is up on high, which through the centuries, people have always said, you look up to heaven, you look up, you look up. Everyone looks up to spiritual things. These visions, they happen high. It just seems to be more of a focus on an upward direction as opposed to downward. So that's one correlation that I noticed with that. And as far as the white goes, I don't know if she was bathed in the white light like the lady that I saw. She was very much a human being, appeared to be solid, but she was inside that white light, that brilliant, brilliant, bright white light. I don't know what she looked like. We probably need more of a description, a bit more detail on what she looked like. But, there it is. Something truly spiritual happened, a vision that he saw having to do with the white light.
Yeah, so with you, well, he had it was over a period of time. It was a shadow animal, and then this thing happened, like several months later. With you in the documentary, you were struggling with kind of a forceful, evil, kind of tormenting shadow figure. It wasn't an animal, it was a being, but you didn't quite know if it was human, which you talked about. And then over the course of probably several years, then this lady in white introduced herself, and eventually the shadow figure left. Can you give a very quick synopsis of what happened? I know it was over the course of many years, how you were tormented, and then you met this woman in white and how you felt. And then after that, you were just at peace, right?
Yeah, pretty much everything slowed down after that. So, but you basically described it. It's not something that I was looking for. It was just something that happened. I don't feel that it's something that I made happen. It's something that somebody else made happen, which is really interesting. And it's kind of hard to describe why. It's a lesson to be learned, almost kind of like throwing a kid some car keys, say, go learn how to drive the car, without doing any studying, but you're going to get a good education. Even if you crash, you'll be okay, but you'll get a good education on how to drive that car. So maybe it was something like that, where I was in the field, and they thought that it would be a good idea to give me quite a lesson on what spirituality is. I know there are other people who have had, a lot of spiritual contact like this. There's a lot of people might be scattered around, but when they come together in a group, you learn some things. It's common, but it's not uncommon. Yeah, it's a strange thing.
So I want to ask you, if I remember correctly, several of your shadow person experiences were when you were in bed. I don't know if you were paralyzed or going through sleep paralysis, but then some of them would happen like when you're in the kitchen, when you're awake, when you're getting a bowl of cereal, right? So it wasn't just like pure sleep paralysis. It was a mixture of experiences that you have with a shadow figure.
Well, the experiences that I had were what I would have to say were out-of-body experiences, because when I went to sleep, I would wake up and I'd be on the other side. And different things would happen. Sometimes there's not much, nothing much would happen. Other times I have an interaction. And sometimes the whole point of being on the other side was directed because I would wake up immediately when I saw that shadow person. As soon as I would see that shadow person, that thing would be on me in a second and start just bashing me around, strangling me, beating me up, throwing me around. And all those feelings come with it, feeling of speed, the feeling of someone else's hands directly on you was very real. So those kind of things happened in an out-of-body experience for me. And the only time that I really had seen anything in an awakened state, was that time in my kitchen when I saw that thing standing there, bathed in that white light, just not even moving. It was just sitting, not doing anything, sitting there in the air, just floating in the air. And after a few seconds, it just went to onto my left and disappeared, and all that white light just traveled with it, and that was gone. And then about a week later, I had that experience with that woman who came on down from the sky, as it appears, in a rectangular shaped window, almost like a portal, and that's when that interaction happened.
Were you awake when that happened? Were you like in a dream state? Whereas your wife was aware of that, or where were you when that happened?
No, she didn't experience anything. The only thing that she would experience is my reaction as I come back into my body, and my big inhale and my reaction as I wake up from having one of those experiences. And I would talk about it with her. But other than that, she didn't see anything. She didn't experience any of it. I wish my reaction or my mind was a little quicker, because when it happened in the kitchen, when I was awake, she was in her office, and she would have been within eyesight of it, but I didn't fear to take my eyes off of it because I just stared at that thing, and I wanted to make sure that I was looking at it. I didn't want to take my eyes off it. And it was only there for a few seconds, maybe 4 seconds, and then it was gone, and there was just no time to really react or gather my thoughts over what I was seeing because it was just such a fantastic sight.
So the last episode with the lady in white, so were you astral traveling? Were you in a dream state? So you weren't awake? It wasn't like at night you saw it when you were awake. You was in when you were in a dream state or astral traveling when you saw the lady in white the last time?
Yeah, it was definitely a travel experience. Very much aware that where I was and what my surroundings looked like. My consciousness expanded outward, and I could see myself. I could see her. Everything else was dark. And the only thing that was illuminated was that rectangular shape of the portal that she was appearing in. And I was in the space in between, and I remember standing there looking up as this portal ascended and got larger, and with her looking down to her left, smiling, her hair waving slowly, and a breeze, what looked like a breeze, and then all around her was the white light. But she was very clear, very human. That's when I had the transfer of the spirit, the love and the blessing, I guess you could say. Extreme love and warmth just filled me up, and I just stood there in the presence of that person. And one of the things I wanted to add about that is that experience of receiving that I had at another time. One of my other experiences, this one was, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. I had woken up, and again, there was almost like a portal, but it was more hazy, not so defined. And there was a group of people that were looking at something that was very, very bright, and the light was coming from it, and they were gathered around looking at it. And there was probably 8, 9, maybe 10 people from what I could see, and it was kind of cut off because I was looking at the edge of the crowd. And on the very back side was a short, older woman, and she had on a black sequined dress on, and she was looking too, but she was short, so she couldn't really see through the crowd, but it didn't really matter for some reason. And as I was looking at this crowd, she turned and she looked at me, and she walked over to me, and she threw her hands up to say, "I want to give you a hug." And I remember bending down and giving her a hug because I'm like 6'2", and this lady must have been about all of 5'4", maybe. And I bent down, I gave her a hug, and again, right in the middle of my chest, that warm, loving, extra spirit came into my chest and started to spread throughout my chest and into my whole body, and it just filled me up, lit me up. So it's kind of telling me that with these experiences that it's a very shared way of life for them. I think they live that way, and they're able to transfer that into us if they so choose, because it's happened twice now.
So when you say they, would you say it's a guardian angel, a light being? What would you describe it as?
The people who travel into the next world, into the next level of existence, when they go from this world into the next. Shadow people are people. They're humanoid in shape. They're people. There's certain truths that are involved in this stuff, and once you have experiences like that, you kind of, right from your, right from your toes, that what you're seeing is the truth. Like, I could never come back from one of those experiences and say, "Oh, that one was just a dream." There's no way. There's a certain truthfulness of what it is that you get from it.
You for a while were pretty well regarded in the industry as an EVP expert and specialist. You'd written a book on it. You'd appeared on several shows. You stopped a while ago. Why did you stop your paranormal investigating?
It just happened, and I didn't feel the need to continue to do this anymore. The education that I was getting was so far ahead of asking questions in the dark and then relying on a recorder and spotty voices for any kind of answers of what the paranormal is all about, what spiritual activity is about. The out-of-body experiences are the way that you need to study spirit to get an idea of what the spirit world really is. It's not like they spoke to me and said, "Yes, this is how it works," and they just go ahead and tell you everything. That never happened, but the experience did in a certain way. That satisfied me, I guess. I didn't have a need to go back. It's kind of like going to MIT And then, learning things there while all along you were working at Radio Shack and talking to the guy next to you, trying to get information about something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why would you go back to a Radio Shack buddy of yours when you can go to MIT and get that kind of an education?
So for the EVP hunting, the wow factor was kind of gone because you'd kind of had your learning escalated. One last question, Michael. So we've talked before, you believe in multiple heavens and multiple hells. And another guest I recently talked to talked about this as well. So how did you come to that understanding that there were multiple heavens and multiple hells?
Well, because there are multiple types of personalities. The way I see it is that people create their own key. Your own soul, your own life forges a key. And when you die, your soul, which is now a key, fits into a certain lock. And when that lock is opened, you go into that door, through that door of where your life experiences, have forged that key. That's where you go. You go into a spot where there are like people just like you. So because there are differences in where I've been, it shows me that there are different levels of places to be in the spirit world. It's not just one place. There are different places, and they're very different from each other. So everyone from Swedenborg to the Bible to, I'm sure, other teachings as well, that there are many heavens, there are many thrones in heaven, there's many hells. Just the experiences that I have kind of prove that out to myself, that that's absolutely true. There's the bright white light, there's the space in between, there is the more hell-like or barren wasteland places that I have visited many times, and it varies so much in all of that. So that tells me that in those different places, that these are where people are, that's different than the other places. So there's at least 3 or 4 places that I know of that I've seen that are very different from each other. And it has to be more varied than that. That can't be all of it. I highly doubt that I saw all of it. I only saw the tip of the iceberg. So there's got to be much, 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 much more than what I've seen.
Okay, thanks for listening. A couple quick footnotes. The recording with Butch Gibson was actually, it was cut off, so we lost the last couple minutes. So just wanted to throw out 2 quick things. One, the name of the band, the origin for the band, 3 and 20, that's where Butch's recording studio is. So that's how they named it. I think it's between, Route 3 and 20, but it's based on the location of their recording studio. One other thing that I followed up after the interview was, why did Butch's dog leave? Because that was very odd. And I asked a friend, a pet psychic, Rob Guttrow, who, full disclosure, without doing an investigation, could only make an assumption. And his thought was, look, dogs are very olfactory, meaning they need a scent. If they see something without a scent, it kind of freaks them out. Rob has mentioned that on several of my prior podcasts. So what could have happened was the dog noticed either the cat's shadow figure or even the positive woman in light, and not being able to have a sense with that or recognizing that could have caused the dog a lot of angst and caused it to leave. So there you go. Just a guess, but that's what we think. So thanks for listening, and we look forward to having you next time. Bye.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared.
Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout-out in an upcoming episode, and the world will know how swell you are.